Welcome back to the channel, guys. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. Today I'm doing a weird video because I've just felt I needed to talk about this new Lord of the Rings series and all these characters that are hovering around my head right now. Now, I do believe I do have an interesting take, which is different from most people. I do believe the show is going to fail, but I don't know if it's down to the fact that certain characters are in it that shouldn't be in it, and the way they're portrayed shouldn't be portrayed. I am a huge fan of the movies. I'm a huge fan of the books. Hobbit is probably one of my favourite books of all time. It's just one of those things. I enjoy it. I haven't really read any of the other stuff, but I want to just point out the main thing that I think will mean that this series will fail is because of the main characters. And I want to point out these, no, them dudes. Other side, this side. These guys, Isildur, Galadriel, and Elrond. We know what happens to them, because even the most basic fan who just watched the movies knows those three characters because they're in the movies. So having a prequel series that's going to be 5 seasons long is pointless. There's no suspense. When you see Galadriel hang off what was she hanging off of, like a cliff or something, we know she survives. When you see Isildur, I don't know, do some stuff, or Lord Elrond do some stuff, we know where they end up. There's no suspense there. And yes, maybe these characters above me now are going to be really interesting and really good, and they're going to be brilliant, they're going to be show stealers, whatever happens, the Dwarven Queen and this woodland elf. But the problem is Amazon has decided to race bend them, make a dwarf. There's no Tolkien lore, there's no black elves, there's no black dwarves. Tolkien lore, elves have long hair. And then when it comes to dwarves, even female dwarves have beards. You can't get around that. That's statements of fact when it comes to Tolkien lore. So they've already set it off at a bad foot. So I feel that most people, when I watch all the coverage over the trailer getting ratio and all that, which is rightfully so, because it does just look like a Narnia ripoff. It doesn't look like it looks worse than even the Hobbit trilogy movies were. And those movies are bad for that CGI and this whole 45 frames per second shit that they did. Oh man. But no, they messed up by having their newish characters, the ones that we didn't already know what happens to them, the ones that we might actually have suspense for, might actually want to get invested in again, because it's going to be hard to not see Cate Blanchett, Hugo Weaving, and I don't know who the guy who played Isildur was in the Peter Jackson films were, but he was pretty sound for his 5 minutes that he was in it for. It's going to be bad because of that. There's going to be fan outcry because of the lore getting mistreated, but I want to point out the fact is that the story isn't going to be as suspenseful as even the original Lord of the Rings was, even Game of Thrones, because there was people who read the books and they knew what was coming, but that was a small majority of the people who actually enjoyed the show, so they didn't know what was happening. So when the Red Wedding and the Purple Wedding, all that stuff happened in Game of Thrones, yeah, Jon Snow getting killed, major spoilers for Game of Thrones, but come on, it's been out for like 10 years. That was all a surprise. There isn't going to be a surprise because the Lord of the Rings is going to be the second age of Middle-earth. We know, out of all these characters here, 5 characters, we know at least all these characters end up in the third age with Lord of the Rings. We don't even know who these characters are, so they either die or don't come back. And there's going to be hobbits in the second age when there shouldn't be. There's going to be multi-raced hobbits, which shouldn't be. Again, similar with the elves and the dwarves. But I also believe, this is a big weird take just to end it on, when it comes to the race swapping and the race bending, that is not something that just immediately turns me off. It's when the story isn't going to work, and that's my argument, because the story isn't going to work because there's going to be no suspense with the main characters because we know where they end up. So you're not going to care when they're in peril or anything like that. You're not going to give a shit when they have some sort of revelation because you're like, wait, you're going to become Cate Blanchett, you're going to become Lord Elrond, Hugo Weaving. It doesn't matter, man. We know where you're going to end up. And with these other characters, they're going to have to go a long way because people are just going to be out crying that it's wrong. And again, what could they have done? I don't know. It's a tough thing to sell. And there's rumours that they're going to buy the rights to the actual Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Because this is the thing that's a bit under the radar. Amazon haven't bought the rights to Lord of the Rings. They've bought the right to 150 pages of the appendices. So that's what they can play with this series. And that doesn't include stuff like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So, and those have become on sale. Apparently it's for like $2 billion, but let's face it, that's like a drop in the ocean for Amazon at the moment. But yeah, I'm worried. because I'm a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings books. I do separate the books from the films. I am a huge fan of the Peter Jackson original trilogy. I even have a guilty pleasure with the Battle of the Five Armies Peter Jackson movie. I enjoy that for an action movie. The other movies are garbage though. And this one is going to be... It's going to be hard to even get to the Hobbit level of bad. Put it that way. But guys, I don't want me to ramble on for too long. I just decided to make a little video about Lord of the Rings because I thought I am a huge fan. I'm rereading them, funny enough. I've read The Hobbit about 5 or 7 times in my life. I read it first when I was like 12, and then I've read it again when I'm sure I was like 16, 17. I read it all in one day once, as mad as that is. I actually sat down and read it on a beach for like 12 hours. It was crazy. It was good. And I love Lord of the Rings. But yeah, Lord of the Rings is my Star Wars. Lord of the Rings is my... I don't know what you call it. People of an older generation treat Lord of the Rings the way they treat Star Wars, but let's face it, Star Wars didn't have books to start with. Star Wars was the original trilogy of movies. So that the take to take from it is, yes, I fully agree with the whole go woke, go broke, but I do believe you can go woke and you can actually succeed. Now, I've looked up a few examples of shows or TV shows or movies that I have went woke and I've actually legitimately been good, and I've watched and went, I saw all the singling, all the kind of woke culture in it, but it was generally a good story. Because A, I didn't know what was going to happen. And the problem is, yes, I've come from my point of view, you've read the books, Ben, so you shouldn't be upset if you know what's going to happen. The kind of the wide strokes. The big stroke, I don't know, what's that phrase? Big strokes, wide strokes. But the problem is, about maybe 2/3 of the characters in this show are going to be characters in Lord of the Rings. The movies, which is widely viewed, and that's what the fan base is built off, those Peter Jackson movies. And they know the characters survive. So what is the point? It's just a prequel, man. There's a reason the Star Wars prequels, it did focus on Obi-Wan a little bit. Like, he showed his little journey in Phantom Menace and stuff, but he was very much a side character to Anakin, and people, only few, I would argue a lot of people didn't know Anakin was Darth Vader and that sort of stuff off the bat. Of course, when you caught them what they were doing, like turning them bad and stuff like that, you need to understand your story has to be correct, but you can then have stuff that's woke. And yeah, for example, woke, I don't know, I watched some weird shows which are very female empowerment, gender, like make sure gender fluidity. You have the show Billions has like a transgender person who's pretty sound, but it's their identity as being a transgender person, but it's not their character. Their character is actually quite interesting. You have Fleabag. I watched Fleabag quite recently. That was very female empowerment. It's not made. It definitely wasn't made for a white male watching it. Put it that way. But I can argue that show is brilliant. Like, that's a 10 out of 10 show for me when I watched it. Even though it had all those singles, all the stuff that probably Amazon's going to have in this. But the problem with this is going to be, I don't know. It's going to be bad. But anyway, I'm not going to. I've most certainly downvoted the trailer because I think that's what we need to do. Is, as I say, as a consumer and a customer, I don't know what term you want to use it, as a viewer, I'm still going to watch it because I love the world. I'm aware that it doesn't lead into the Peter Jackson movies. That's how they're arguing why they're not going to have there isn't going to be a mass genocide to get rid of all the kind of mixed race characters because they're not in the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit movies at least. But yeah, tell me in the comments what you think. Drop a like, drop a comment. Main takeaway is there's not going to be any suspense here. Everybody's focusing on the woke stuff and the basically wrecking the lore, which is, I reckon those are valid points. But in my point of view of what makes a good show, those are just like maybe they're 2 runs lower in terms of importance. The most important thing is that there's going to be no suspense with these characters because the main characters in the show are going to be characters that we know survive off the bat. And when I say everybody understands that they're going to survive, I mean literally everybody who watched the movies are going to know because they're there. And it's after. It's madness. Alright, this is madness. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Drop a like, drop a comment, subscribe. I'll make some random movies someday. When there's nothing gaming to watch or like play, I'll basically talk about this stuff. Tell me if I'm off on this. I could be. It's just my own personal opinion is that the main critiques of Lord of the Rings are valid. It's just you should be focusing on the story and how the story isn't going to have any impact. The story could be a 10 out of 10 in terms of the events that happened if the audience didn't know these characters were already plot armored to fuck up, which they're gonna be. And yeah, it's gonna be fighting a losing battle when it tries to get these characters kind of involved. and try and explain them away. How, like, does she shave every day? You know what I mean? If they have a throwaway line saying that female dwarves, yeah, we do have beards, but we shave them, and maybe they've explained why this dwarf doesn't have long hair, this elf doesn't have long hair, and maybe he's a bit of like a mud. I'm saying it like a Harry Potter, a bit like a mudblood sort of thing. Maybe he's got a, I don't know, maybe he's a product of a man, a black man and a white elf or vice, and that's why he came out kind of mixed race. These are tough just things to talk about, but you could argue it sometimes. That's two examples they can explain both those lore points away with these two individual characters. But these guys, the other guys, these guys, we know they're in the Lord of the Rings, so they know they're safe. It doesn't. I'm not interested in seeing Galadriel, warrior Galadriel. I'm interested in seeing Cate Blanchett, Galadriel, and Lord Elrond. He doesn't even look like old Elrond, not even young. And the problem with elves are, when they age, they then stay at that age thousands of years. This guy doesn't look like Hugo Weaving, so you can't imagine him turning into him. He's gonna have to be like 20 years old at this point to look that young, and then turn into Hugo Weaving. Man, I'll see you in the next one. Drop a like, drop a comment, drop a subscribe. I'll make more of these kind of talky videos. It's alright, I've enjoyed it. And yeah, just tell me if that takes a bit off, because I must admit, I appreciate the valid points about the lore. Again, I want to just reiterate, all the things that people are losing their minds about and getting angry about are true, but I do want to point out that it's important to realise they've made a show on characters that we already know live. You're already losing, even if you made a brilliant story, which I don't know if they did. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace, alright?